out there. Welcome to Wake Up to the Bible. I'm Daniel Kaplan. I'm here with my father, Dr. Kaplan, and we are going through the books of the law, Genesis through Deuteronomy, over the course of this year. Now, we're doing just a little bit every day. We're following the traditional Jewish readings. The second reading for this week is Genesis 18:15 through 33, and I will be reading from the Robert Alter translation, and then we will discuss. And Sarah dissembled, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. And he said, Yes, you did laugh. And the men arose from there and looked out over Sodom, Abraham walking along with them to see them off. And the Lord had thought, Shall I conceal from Abraham what I'm about to do? For Abraham will surely be a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him. For I have embraced him, so that he will charge his sons and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord, to do righteousness and justice, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham all that he spoke concerning him. And the Lord said, The outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah, how great! Their offense is very grave. Let me go down and see whether, as the outcry that has come to me, they have dealt destruction, and if not, I shall know. And the men turned from there and went on toward Sodom while the Lord was still standing before Abraham. And Abraham stepped forward and said, Will you really wipe away out the innocent with the guilty? Perhaps there may be 50 innocent within the city. Will you really wipe out the place and not spare it for the sake of the 50 innocent within it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put to death the innocent with the guilty, making innocent and guilty the same. Far be it from you. Will not the judge of all the earth do justice? And the Lord said, Should I find in Sodom 50 innocent within the city, I will forgive the whole place for their sake. And Abraham spoke up and said, Hear, pray, I have presumed to speak to my Lord where I have presumed to speak to my Lord where I am but dust and ashes. Perhaps the 50 innocent will lack 5. Will you destroy the whole city for the 5? And he said, I will not destroy if I find there 45. And he spoke to him still again, and he said, Perhaps there will be found 40. And he said, I will not do it on account of the 40. And he said, Please let not my Lord be incensed, and let me speak. Perhaps there will be found 30. And he said, I will not do it if I find there 30. And he said, Here, pray, I presume to speak to my Lord. Perhaps there will be found 20. And he said, I will not destroy for the sake of 20. And he said, Please let not my Lord be incensed, and let me speak just this time. Perhaps there will be found 10. And he said, I will not destroy for the sake of 10. And the Lord went off when he finished speaking with Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. All right, so we have an interesting bargaining situation going on here. What comes to mind?
Well, in the Middle Eastern culture, haggling of this sort is very much a respected way of life. There was a story I read about a British non-Muslim who attempted to sneak into Mecca, but he was discovered when he went to buy a glass of juice and didn't haggle about the price. This is evidently a true story. Um, but it's interesting when Abraham haggles here, he still is so respectful in how he does it. So obviously, God allows you to struggle with certain things, and He allows you to question, but you have to do so, respectfully. I would say this too: He created us with a conscience, with a sense of right and wrong. So this is not the same as physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. With ethical matters, it is fair to ask about them. It's fair to ask about ethical matters because God gave us a conscience and a sense of right and wrong. Obviously, He's perfect and we're not, but He gives us the opportunity to struggle with certain things and to ask about certain things.
One thing that comes to mind for me, and this is a literary choice, is where you have, and God thinking shall I concede from Abraham what I'm about to do is kind of a question, which is so humanizing, right? It's like he's having to consider what information to give to Abraham or not. Now, obviously, we can think of from from a humanistic perspective, from a compassionate standpoint, he knows who's there, right? He knows that Abraham has family that he cares about, and it's clear from Abraham's response that Abraham himself is compassionate about people in which he doesn't even know, because the first thing he doesn't necessarily to talk about is his family. He's just talking about innocent people in general. But I just find that interesting.
In the Bible, Abraham is called a friend of God. We see it in Isaiah, we see it in James. And here in John 15:15, Jesus says to his apostles, No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends, for all things that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. So you see the kind of relationship that God has with Abram. Now, in the past, I've looked at Abram's motives as very much virtuous, being concerned with being fair, but maybe there's just partly the problem. He's concerned with Lot and his family, whether they're going to be part of this judgment. That may be wrong on my part, but God does save Lot out of it. But that never comes up. He never says, "What about Lot?" So it does seem that his concern is beyond Lot, but just for other righteous people he thinks might be there. And evidently there were not 10 in in the area, or God would have spared it according to what he told Abraham.
Or at the very least, he knows how to hide the ball well for purposes of persuasion. But yeah, no, it is very interesting that he doesn't. And it also, the account, even if he's not saying it and he's being strategic or humble and not mentioning it, the account could do that inward thought like it just did with Sarah a minute ago, right? And it doesn't do that. So we do not have that in there. It is omitted. And often, omission is interesting in terms of what it is. There is still that let it's not let us go down, it's let me go down. But again, you have this idea of God having to humble himself in order to be involved with us, and it's similar to the verbiage of the Tower of Babel. What I think is interesting, though, is the way specifically that Abraham haggles with God, and you mentioned it a little bit in terms of the respect. But what I also think is you have the position of somebody who's throwing theology back at God in terms of, far be it from you because you are the judge of all the earth and all of this. This gives a sense of what he thinks God is, and so therefore he's he's not just using human logic. Like that sounds really awful to me. He's trying to get onto that level, whatever his quote unquote biblical mindset understanding was. This action did not fit into it, and ultimately he's at least somewhat right in that not everybody does get destroyed, right?
It's interesting that in most cases, when Abraham is told to do something, he just does it. But here he questions because evidently here he is concerned with the fairness of it, and there is a contrast as my son pointed out, with Noah, who doesn't make this kind of argument. That doesn't mean that Noah didn't, but it's not recorded there. I would like to make this comment, more of a technical comment. The Jews have a tradition of 18 times where they made edits in the Bible, and they tell you what they were. Some of them are very obvious. In the book of Job, Job is asked to curse God and die. They didn't want to write that, so they said bless God and die. And all of your translations translated curse. Maybe there's some footnotes there, but in other words, they didn't want to write curse God and die, but they let you know that they edited it. Now here they edited it in this way. This is Genesis 18:22. Then the men turned away from there and went towards Sodom. And here's what the original said: But Yahweh still stood before Abraham. But the Jews edited it. But Abraham still stood before Yahweh because the other was too anthropomorphic for them. But at least they admit that what the original was. But it was just too anthropomorphic for them to put it in there. I just thought I want to share that with everyone. I'm not giving you anything that you couldn't look up.
It's very interesting. Now, Obviously, the first number that he starts out with is 50, and the first thing that comes to mind with 50 is the counting towards Pentecost, which is interesting considering what you just said about unleavened bread, and of course that's the next holiday to come up. So it's just rolling right along, right? We've got nice parallels going on.
I think there are 7 steps to this. First, he says, "Will you destroy the righteous with the wicked?" generically, and then he gives them 6 numbers. I think it's 50, 45, right?
Hmm.
40, 30, 20, 10. So altogether, I come 7 parts if you count the generic question. And evidently, there weren't 10, which is really sad.
Especially considering it probably was a fairly big area because it would seem like there was a lot of people there. Now, when it says 10, obviously 10 is kind of a quorum, right? So it's like you're not going to go below 10. It's like you don't have anything at that point. So that's the lowest he'll go. However, if we again we go back to what my dad was saying about his family, he does know that his family is less than, or he might at least speculate his family is less than 10 people because they are.
Yeah. So I think the 10 would mean family plus others.
And it just goes to show that unfortunately his family wasn't able to have the impact that they were able. And I'm not saying that as a criticism to the family, it's just not how it worked out. But obviously, it seems overall as we read further that perhaps the area had more an effect on the family than the family had an effect on the area.
Say that again? I'd like to catch that comment again.
I said that you might think that there would be, a halo effect with some of the people, but it seems like the area had more of an effect on the however many it is. It's five, right? And instead of them having an effect on the area.
Right. They just evidently their influence was not effective enough while they were there.
Right, and even though what my dad was saying, he's called righteous Lot, and considering the tremendous amount of pressure, you can imagine what they could have gotten up into, and they probably did not. But still, you can see that the culture was having an effect on them as we go through the next passages.
Mhm.
Any other comments?
Yeah.
All right, so I hope you're enjoying this show. If you are, like, subscribe, hit the bell, and comment below if you have any suggestions or questions about this material in the law, Genesis through Deuteronomy. That's what we're going to be going through. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow to discuss the next portion.